Nice to see you. Ambassador, let me start with this. There has been, so what is the mission? Is the mission to demilitarize Hamas once and for all? Or are we to sense that the mission is, okay, in this, it's a short-term mission, destroy the tunnels?
Well, the mission is, as the Prime Minister has said, sustain peace and quiet for the people of Israel. Remember, Israel agreed to a ceasefire 2 weeks ago before you had the ground operation to take out the tunnels. Since then, because Hamas rejected that ceasefire that was supported by the whole international community, by the Arab League, by everybody, Israel then went in after terrorists came out from one of these tunnels and tried to kill a lot of civilians and kidnap other civilians. We went into Gaza with our ground forces and we've uncovered these tunnels. What the Prime Minister is saying is that regardless of whether there's a ceasefire or not, he's going to destroy the tunnels. No more, I mean, the need to destroy the tunnels is no different than, let's say, we would have found 10,000 rockets in Gaza. We're not going to hand them back to Hamas. So the tunnels that we've uncovered will be destroyed. You can have a ceasefire sooner than you destroy the tunnels. But no matter whether there's a ceasefire or not, he has to destroy this terror infrastructure that Hamas has built up in Gaza.
Well, I only ask that because if the demilitarization of Hamas is sort of, it's a hard... That's a hard, it's not really a quantitative thing to be able to say accomplished doing, and that, well, by signaling that, that sounded like you guys could be in there for weeks.
No, let me be very clear.
So really the tunnels is the mission.
The mission is sustain peace and quiet. I would separate it into three different things. One is you have to end the rocket attacks, which have not ended. Every time we go for a ceasefire, humanitarian ceasefire or otherwise, Hamas continues to fire the rockets, and they're continuing to fire the rockets, about 100 a day. So first, to end the rocket attacks. The second is you're going to destroy the tunnels that we found. Then there's a third issue, which you're getting to, the issue of demilitarization. How do we get an effective mechanism in place? And that won't happen before a ceasefire. That could happen immediately after a ceasefire when you start these discussions. How do we have an effective mechanism in place to make sure that Hamas simply doesn't rearm itself and to fuel its military machine so that we're not in another conflict with Hamas a year or a year and a half from now? Why are 90% of the Israeli public against the ceasefire? Not because they don't want the violence to end. They want to make sure that when it ends, that there's going to be quiet, and they're not going to be right back here 6 months or a year from now.
I want to get you to respond to something White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said, that he believes that Israel's not living up to the high standards that they say you guys set when it comes to avoiding civilian casualties, that you guys need to set a higher standard to avoid civilian casualties.
Well, I don't know what standard he's talking about. No country in the world has set a higher standard than Israel. I would remind the White House spokesperson, I didn't hear exactly what he said, but we have 2/3 of our country in bomb shelters. And I would ask him to ask himself a question. If 200 million Americans were in bomb shelters, would the United States use less force than we are using? Would they take greater care with civilians that we are using? I think he knows the answer to that, and I think hundreds of millions of Americans know the answer to that. We have the highest standards of any military in the world at keeping the civilians of the other side out of harm's way. We drop leaflets, make phone calls, send text messages, tell people to evacuate areas. Right now, our soldiers are fighting in areas that other countries faced with similar threats would never put their ground forces into. And we're taking risks to our own soldiers. So we deeply regret any civilian casualties. We don't target them, but Hamas embeds itself in these civilian areas, in mosques, in hospitals, in schools. They use all their people as human shields. That's the enemy that we're fighting.
Have you guys considered trying to set up some sort of refugee system on the Israel side of the border, so that when you drop these leaflets, you say, come to the border, come get shelter on Israel's side of the border?
Well, I think there's a lot of complications.
Setting up like a refugee camp.
I think there's a lot of complications with doing it on Israel's side of the border. There's all sorts of ideas that people have. How do you make sure that civilians are out of harm's way? I can tell you that not only do we drop leaflets and say, leave point A, we tell them go to point B. I'm not saying it's not difficult.
Well, it's one thing with a leaflet. How about going and saying, here's a leaflet, we need you to evacuate, and we'll help you evacuate?
Well,
should you take it to that next step?
So are our soldiers now going to accompany them while they're being attacked by Hamas fighters? I mean, would you want American troops under fire with a civilian population? Because Hamas...
Can you do both? I mean, some would argue you guys are a great military, but you could do both.
We have to understand, Chuck, who we're dealing with. This is Al-Qaeda. This is Israel's Al-Qaeda. That's what Hamas is. They are committed to our destruction. They're a genocidal organization. They don't care about their own people. They were dancing on 9/11. Dancing. Hamas was dancing on 9/11.
There's no doubt.
With
Hamas.
Thousands of
You've got almost unity in the Arab world about Hamas.
The Prime Minister of Hamas condemned the United States for killing Osama bin Laden. So you're dealing with Al-Qaeda. So ask me, How would you accompany these civilians, help them get out of harm's way when al-Qaeda fighters are actually attacking your troops? So this is very difficult. It's very complicated. We're doing things that no country has done to get civilians out of harm's way. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We investigate it. It's important, though, to always report the facts. A couple days ago, you know, there was an attack on a hospital in Gaza, and there was an attack on a refugee camp. One of your reporters actually rushed to judgment, said it was an Israeli drone. It turns out it wasn't an Israeli drone. It was a rocket fired by Islamic Jihad. 4 rockets were fired within Gaza. One of them went to the sea. One of them hit that hospital. One of them hit a refugee camp. One of them went to Ashkelon and was intercepted by Iron Dome. So it's important, after you make an allegation, I would just ask you, Chuck, and your reporter who's sitting in Gaza, correct the mistake he made, admit that this was not Israel that was taking this action.
Let me ask you one final question when it comes to Abbas. What would you like Abbas to be doing right now?
Well, President Abbas should be working to advance peace with Israel.
Do you feel like he is?
Well, I think he made a very big mistake 3 months ago because he reached out and forged an alliance with Hamas, with this al-Qaeda organization. I don't think Abbas should ever be in alliance with Hamas, and I hope when this is all said and done, when this is over and we reach a ceasefire, that one of the first things that Abbas will do is end the alliance he made with Hamas and return to peace negotiations.
So if he ends an alliance with Hamas, would you guys be able to, because there's always been this issue here with a peace deal. On one hand, can you deal with Abbas if he doesn't speak for all Palestinians, particularly in Gaza? At the same time, he made the calculation, well, I'll try to speak for everybody, but that meant doing a deal with Hamas, the democratically elected governing body of Gaza.
The Nazis were democratically elected in Germany, so it doesn't mean anything. The issue is we had negotiations with Abbas before he forged this alliance with Hamas. What stopped the negotiations was his decision to reach out to Hamas, because Israel will not negotiate with a party that's committed to our destruction. We want to make peace with part of Palestinian society that's committed to peace. We are not going to be able to totally solve the problems of Gaza. That's an issue that has to be worked out in the negotiations. How do you implement that peace when you have an organization like Hamas? There are a lot of problems with it, but the only path is for President Abbas to turn his back on Hamas and to return to peace negotiations with Israel.
Ambassador Dermer, I appreciate you coming on.